Okay, good evening. We might get started. Order, please. We're going to get started. Sorry. Welcome to everyone, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's meeting on Monday, the 21st of October 2024, and welcome to those who are in the public gallery. Being 5:30 p.m, I now officially declare this meeting open. I wish to advise that council meetings are recorded and made publicly available on our website. Council meetings are also live streamed on YouTube, and in accordance with Council's policy, I'll ask the CEO to confirm that the audio recording has started. Yes. Thank you. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, pay my respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge today's Tasmanian Aboriginal community. Our attendees this evening are myself, Councillor Reid, Deputy Mayor Councillor Gladright, Councillor Antoli, Councillor Bain, Councillor Cordova, Councillor Dean, Councillor Fox, Councillor Midgley, Councillor Richardson and Councillor Street. From our staff this evening we have the CEO, Mr Stewart, Director of People and Finance, Mr Spinks, Director of Governance, Recreation and Property Services, Mr Smee, Director of Engineering Services, Mr Reeve, Director of Environment, Development and Community Services, Ms Shakuti, Manager of Development Services, Ms Tyler Moore, our Senior Planner, Mr Donovan, our Media and Communications Advisor, Ms Adams, and our Executive Assistant, Mrs Morton. We have no apologies this evening. We're now on page 1, confirmation of minutes. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the open session of Council meeting number 18, held on the 7th of October 2024, be confirmed as a true record. I've got a mover in Councillor Fox, seconder in Councillor Gladright. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Workshops held since the last council meeting. We had a workshop last Monday evening, the 14th of October, in relation to environmental reports. Page 2, declarations of interest. Does any councillor have a declaration? Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. This relates to the DA 2024-4 Spring Farm. I've had correspondence with the proponent, but I'll remain in the room.
Thank you. I think we have all had correspondence from the proponent, so I think that all cancels one another out. Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? No, thank you. Transfer of agenda items. Is there any item on the agenda that a councillor would like to transfer from open into closed session or closed into open session? No, thank you. Questions without notice in the public. Does any member of the public wish to ask a question without notice? No, thank you very much. And questions on notice in the public, we had one. It was in relation to power outlets at the hub from Mr Mark Denellen and an officer response from Mr Smee. Takes us to questions without notice from councillors. Does any councillor wish to ask a question without notice? Councillor Cordova and then Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Mayor. My question relates to an aquatic centre for Kingborough. In light of Glenorchy City Council, you can see where this is going, can't you? In light of Glenorchy City Council making their announcements today around their plans for an aquatic centre, it feels like Kingborough is about 60 years behind the times. Can we please have an update on our aquatic facility planning? When should we be expecting a report from the Kingborough Aquatic Facility Steering Committee? And do we think that the competition now for federal and state funding with respect to Glenorchy puts Kingborough at any disadvantage?
Mr Smee, would you like to update us on where we're at with the steering facility, please?
Through you, Mayor, early days for the committee. We've only met twice so far, and there is a lot of considerations in relation to the location, the design, the purpose of the facility. We are intending to apply for some federal grant funding to do further analysis in respect to those questions that need to be answered in relation to a report. Too early to say when we might be able to bring a report to council. And the question of competition, look, I really think it's a question of timing and the opportunity, and that opportunity could come at any time. So I don't think we're at a disadvantage with Glenorchy having come out recently with their plans. It's a big capital sum of money, and there are no obvious opportunities to fund that at the moment.
Thank you. A second question through you, Mayor, is about, this time it's around climate governance. So on the 9th of September 2024, the Federal Parliament passed landmark legislation to establish an internationally aligned climate reporting regime in Australia. How is Kingborough Council preparing for mandatory climate governance reporting, and will councillors be receiving a specific workshop around Kingborough Council's climate governance reporting standards and processes?
Thank you. Ms Shakuti.
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. We had our new climate advisor start today. So the role of our climate advisor will be to review our existing plan, and as part of that review will be to look at any new requirements, whether they're state or federal or I suppose good practice that we should be looking to. I believe we're in a very good position. We've already done some carbon and emission accounting. It would be a matter of aligning what we have done in accordance with any new guidelines, and then reporting in accordance with those guidelines. At this stage, we haven't given thought to whether or not there will be a workshop, but we will keep councillors up to date as we progress and our new advisor gets his feet under the desk. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 3 questions. They are primarily around issues with the LPS. They're a bit detailed, and so I would normally write them in beforehand, but because they're time sensitive and community concern is high, I thank the council's indulgence for allowing me to ask them without notice. The first question is around the landscape conservation zone. This zone places a clear emphasis on protecting and conserving landscape values rather than supporting residential development. This is a significant shift, as residential use within the LCZ will become predominantly discretionary. A key observation is that landscape values are in the eyes of the beholder, and it might be different from one council to another. That these landscape values are beneficial to the community, to the observer, rather than the landowner himself, whose property contributes to these values. So with around 1,500 properties slated for conversion to LCZ, landowners are asking me whether there will be a remission of their rates. The argument being that the shift from residential use to a primary public benefit does not align with the original purpose for which they're paying their rates. My question is, given that this is a large-scale rezoning in Kingborough, that is around the LCZ, more than anywhere else I've observed in Tasmania, has the council assessed this as a potential legal challenge or a risk? Is it a real risk? And if so, why or why not?
Ms Shakuti.
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. Yes, of course, we assess the risk of all the changes proposed with the new incoming scheme, and they obviously have to be carefully managed. I believe there was quite a lot of concern in the Huon Valley regarding the scale of properties to be zoned landscape conservation zone. So for context, in Kingborough, there's only 2 properties that are in the rural living zone that will potentially change to the landscape conservation zone. So there's not a large scale shift in Kingborough. And as you probably understand as well, the landscape conservation zone, while it is not named the same or have I suppose the exact requirements of the existing environmental living zone, the outcomes of each of those zones are fairly similar. So most of the properties going to landscape conservation zone are already environmental living zone at the moment. So there's approximately, and it was noted, 1,500 properties that will go to will be landscape conservation zone, and for additional context, that's about 7% of our rateable properties in Kingborough. And the other thing to note is, I suppose, the total number of environmental living zoned properties versus the proposed total number of landscape conservation zone properties, so is actually decreasing. There is a decreasing shift from in those total numbers. It's a bit hard to compare. So given all of those considerations, we don't believe that there's a risk.
Okay, thank you. That's a very helpful response. My second question again is around LCZ. Surprise, surprise. Although local councils have the ability to amend their zone maps to implement new SPPs, that's state planning provisions, or make zoning changes, the primary objective is to consult with the constituents when we create our LPS that reflects the community's expectations. We know, in fact, that in Kingborough, no consultation was conducted to determine zoning changes, even for new or controversial changes like the LCZ. In the absence of any form of community consultation, how did the council planners determine what the community's expectations are around this concept of landscape values?
Ms. Shakuti.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you. As you're aware, this is a state-run process, and Kingborough Council have followed the process defined by the TPC very strictly. The exhibition period is the consultation period. So this is the intent of the exhibition period for members or residents to look at the proposed zoning and the overlays, etc., and to make their submission. I would say that since 2019, Council have been informally engaging with the community and have certainly heard concerns from various groups within the community. The other part, I suppose, that is really important is that the draft LPS was drafted in accordance with all the guidelines set out by the TPC. That was then has been passed on to the TPC for review, and they indicated to Council that they were satisfied that the draft LPS was ready for exhibition. So we're really confident in the process that we have gone through to draft the LPS and also to hear the submissions that get made, or consider the submissions that get made during exhibition. Also to reiterate, those submissions will be provided to the TPC. They will be heard through the hearing process, and it is the TPC who makes the final decision.
Thank you.
One more?
So I have two follow-up questions. Thank you, Ms. Chakudi. I have two follow-up questions from that. The first is the concept that representation is the same as consultation. Could you clarify that? I think the expectation from the community is that consultation is different. It's sort of like a pre-process. Representation is almost like an end process because it actually has a legal final outcome. It goes to a tribunal, it goes to a judiciary body like the TPC, whereas I would say that the community's expectation around consultation is different, that it's sort of co-developing something together. So could you maybe clarify what you meant by that?
Ms. Shakuti.
Through you, Mayor, you're right, they are different. So a consultation process is potentially different, and this is a formal representation process through exhibition, but it is the defined method under the process for the community's positions, opinions and concerns to be made and considered.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned also before that the TPC was happy with the LPS process to date. Is there a requirement in the process that consultation needs to be done with the community around the concept of what constitutes landscape values?
Ms. Shakuti.
Through you, Mayor, no, there's not.
There's no requirement. We have put it in our own past documentation that we want to consult with the community, and I've quoted to council officers the document. It's called the council's land use strategy from May 2019, which I understand from talking to staff in the past has been updated, but I'm assuming consultation hasn't been removed from that document. So given that our own documentation we've posted on our website since 2019 requires that we consult with the community about zone changes, why have we not done it?
Ms. Shakuti.
Through you, Mayor, I believe that there was consultation conducted in the form of information sessions post the 2019 document. But I'll take that on notice to confirm that.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. I'm not aware that that's actually the case.
So, Councillor Antoli, we did hold information sessions previously in
Yep.
relation to this matter, and that was a decision that councillors made. You may recall it was about the first half of last year, because we were considering at the time about how we actually get out to the community the message about we're still waiting to hear from the TPC. So we put out the rates notice. With the rates notices, we put out the information flyer, and then we had sessions that ran following that in quite a few locations around the place, and that provided feedback. It also opened up the opportunity for individuals beyond those sessions to engage with our planning staff, and in particular our strategic planner. And I know that as a result of that he was exceptionally busy from the engaging with members of the community. So I do feel we already have gone beyond what is required of us in a statutory sense, and now with the engagement process that we have announced 2 weeks ago, we have gone above and beyond what any other council has done to consult with the community and get that feedback, so that when the final submission goes to the TPC, that we've got as much feedback and as many representations as we possibly can get from people in the community to feed into that process. So I feel confident that we have provided a lot of opportunities for the community.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that was a valuable process. Notwithstanding anything you've said, I suppose from my point of view, and I may not have worded it well enough, is that when you're and it was sort of in my question as well, and it might have been lost in the backwards and forwards of us talking, when you're setting in place what constitutes a landscape value in one person's eyes, unless there's a strict rule, is different in another. Value in one council's eyes is different than another. So my question was around the risk this poses to us, that we didn't actually go to the community and say, Kingborough, this is what we believe constitutes landscape value. We've used this blunt instrument, and I'm not necessarily criticising it, of anything that is, not everything, but a lot of our community that is 100 metres or above the sea level, because of the value from the road and also from the sea. And value in my eyes could be different in value in another person's eyes. So the question really is around, how did the council planners determine what the community's expectations were around that? So we've chosen 100 metres, and I'd like to sort of know, how did we get to that very quickly? Because that seems to be an issue. Because some people look at their property that's not visible from any part of the community, and it's been caught up in LCZ, and it has no visual value to anybody.
Thank you. Ms Tullamore.
Through you, Mayor, there's clearly a confusion about the different controls. So a lot of the submission then was about the landscape conservation zone. Then there's reference to the 100-metre mark. That's actually to do with the scenic landscape overlay. They're two completely different things. One is a zone, as I've explained. Every property has a zone. Some properties have code overlays on them. So they've got different functions. The reference to the 100 metres is something that exists in the current scheme. It was applied during the interim schemes by the state government, and the minister made a decision to make that a transitional provision of the planning scheme. So it's not council officers that decided to put it in the new one. The minister has said it will transfer to the new one. We agree, and we've said this, and it's also written in the supporting report, which I encourage people to read and is available on our website with all our fact sheets, that it's an unusual way to apply it. We don't necessarily think it's the best way to be applied, and it's something that people could put submissions in if they want, but they do need to acknowledge that it's a transitional requirement put forward by the minister, so there's not as much weight. Certainly once we get to the new planning scheme, it's something that we can look at doing a planning scheme amendment to review and revise. But at this point in time, it's not the right time, unfortunately. And I think it's important for people to understand what the Scenic Landscape Code actually means, is to actually read the document, read the code provision, because then they can see that it's not as scary as some people might have made out, because there's actually very little limitation that it has on a property, and we assess it frequently. They've come to the chamber for the scenic landscape overlay, so it's important to actually read the content to understand it, but it is very different to the zoning.
Yes, thank you.
Further questions?
Yes,
Yep.
I do. And I also have to get to my third one. With regards to overlays, are they handed to us from the state and we apply them prescriptively, or is there some consultation with the community that has to go in the development of those overlays before they are applied?
Ms Tullamore.
Through you, Mayor, some of the code overlays that are provided to us are provided by the state agencies. So the bushfire prone is provided by the TFS. The coastal hazards provided by the state government. Landslide provided by the state government. So lots of them are mapped by the state government, by professionals who have prepared them,
Makes
and we
sense.
then need to adhere to that. Some of the other overlays, such as the heritage overlay, we make selection about heritage. In the instance of Kingborough, we haven't added any new heritage overlays. We just don't have the resources to be able to do the work. So until we do, we can't do that. So that will go in the same as it is in the current planning scheme. The question about was it required to do consultation on those? The exhibition period is the consultation. So no, there isn't a requirement under the legislation to do further consultation on that. If we had more resources, we'd love to do further consultation. We're working with the parameters that we have and also within the legislation, so we're confident that we've applied them as we have. And I would also encourage the public to, if they're unsure about what overlays are and how they work, to look at the information we've provided on our website to get a better understanding of that. And certainly people can put representations in related to overlays as well as zones.
Yep, thank you.
Further question?
Yes, with the scenic overlay, through you, Mayor, is that one of the ones that we can actually build with the community before applying it, and maybe should have?
Ms Tullamore.
Through you, Mayor, no, it's not. As I mentioned, the Minister made a transitional provision.
Right.
So we couldn't amend it. The Minister said it's going over to the new scheme, and that's what it is.
Thank you. There is a number of people that approach me that the scenic overlay is one that is built in consultation, not handed ex cathedra from the Minister, but that's false. Is that correct?
Ms Tullamore.
Through you, Mayor, I'm making comment from going from the interim scheme to the new scheme. So I'm not making comment about how it originally came in, because people may or may not be aware that when the interim schemes that we're going to be here for a very short time, which have been in for an extraordinary long
9
time now,
years.
almost a decade,
Yeah.
they were just applied by the state government. So I'm not sure, and I wasn't here when they were originally established, but I believe the state government came up with that criteria.
Thank you. My final question.
It will be your final question.
Will it? Am I timed, am I, with questions?
No, it's
Oh, okay.
all right.
So you're just being lighthearted. I thought you were threatening me. With my final question is around the decision-making process in the planning process. For those who are not aware in the community, there are potentially four outcomes after this, where before the TPC makes its determination. And one of them is what's called Division 8, where council could possibly be in breach of it. And that's when council fails to comply with the required process. And I'm not in any way accusing council of failing to comply in any way, shape or form. It's an option for the TPC to take if we fail. Where are my notes? In the event that council would be required to cover all costs incurred by the TPC in taking over these responsibilities. So if we fail and the TPC says, no, I'm not happy with the way Kingborough's handled this, there should have been hypothetically consultation here, here and here before we got to there. You guys had your chance, you've had plenty of time, we're going to take over and do it right. Council, that they can actually charge us to do that. And it's called Division 8, Section 35T. Has council assessed that risk? Is there much of a risk of that happening? If it does happen, how would we pay for it?
Ms Shakuti.
Through you, Mayor. Again, yes, the risk of the whole process of transition has been considered and managed very carefully. As described in previous questions, we have followed the process exactly as set out by the state, and which has included reviews by the TPC of our draft LPS, and they are satisfied that it was ready for exhibition. We also provided a detailed supporting document, which is available on our website, showing how we have complied with all the guidelines and requirements set out by the state, which are numerous and onerous. So there is no indication that we have failed with the requirements of the process, and it's a heavily scrutinised process by the TPC, and the risk is extremely low.
Thank you. So I'm assuming then if a significant number of public representations reject the zoning and overlays proposed by council, you could say maybe such as the LCZ, the risk of council running in breach of Division 8 in council's eyes would be very low, because whether or not they've come to that conclusion, our advice is we've still followed the process. Is that your position?
Ms. Shakuti.
Through you, Mayor, yes it is.
Okay.
And of course those representations and submissions will be considered in the final decision making by the TPC, and if they believe changes are required, they will direct council to do that before the final scheme is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks to council officers for indulging me in some of those questions that are a bit technical, but as I mentioned before, they are very topical.
Thank you, Councillor Antoli. Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Mayor. Just the one question, maybe a follow-up, we'll see. Just about the Kingston Hub. Being there on the weekend with one of my councillor colleagues on the Diwali Festival, and seeing on Facebook as well, and talking to the owners that the coffee hole is now closed, which is obviously quite sad for a lot of us parents that attend the park with their little ones and obviously want to go grab a coffee. One of the key considerations, it seems, has been obviously a slowdown in construction work, the apartment's not going ahead, and the access to tradies that will go there in their lunch break or grab a coffee. They've been there for a few years, and now that it's kind of closed, I'm just wondering if there are any plans in how we might, as a council, rethink what we're going to do with that space. Obviously, the bigger part of that tenancy or that area is Traders in Purple. They haven't been there for quite a while because there's nothing to really sell in terms of their apartments. So are there any plans from our perspective as to what we could do differently moving forward there?
So it was certainly very sad to hear that the coffee hole was closing, because I know that there are a lot of groups who were utilising that facility, people who were hiring facilities at the hub, very popular in the mornings with park runners, etc. So that is a great loss from that area, because I think as council we always hoped that we would see that really becoming a central part of the hub. In terms of that space, that entire space is let to Traders in Purple for their showroom area. So the lease that the coffee hole had was in fact with Traders in Purple, not with council. So it would be up to Traders in Purple what they would want to do with the balance of that lease. I'm not sure. I'm not aware of the terms of it or anything like that. That's between them and the Traders in Purple. So yeah, I don't know whether the CEO wants to add anything to what I've said.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. So beyond the points the Mayor's just raised around the specific case with that lease, we are in contact with Traders in Purple around the development plan or around that broader precinct. Obviously, the sooner we can enter into sustainable development within that area and achieve the strategic outcomes that we're looking for from that overall precinct, then it will have the opportunity to sort of reinvigorate the area and bring more sustainable operations in terms of a commercial cafe, for example, into that space. There's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing there, and I feel for the operators of the coffee hole that they weren't able to make that sustainable for them. In regard to the overall development, it's still a tough market out there, and especially in terms of some of that more intense residential development that we're looking for within that precinct. So we need to have some honest conversations about where we are with that in the next little while. we have a project control group around that overall precinct in the next couple of weeks. So we should gain some more information about how we're progressing, what the outlook is at that stage, and we have talked about bringing it back to council for a workshop on the way forward in the future. I think after that time we should have some more insights that might enable that conversation to happen soon.
Councillor Dean.
Right, yeah, just one follow-up then. So obviously we've heard that the slowdown in the development's not happening means that it's not really viable for a cafe, and it is a traders in purple space, which they're not using. If it gets to the point where traders walk away, or it's our facility ultimately, and it's not being used, are we able to step in and in terms of wanting to utilise that space, I suppose, better than just having an empty showroom that doesn't get used? Can we step in at any point, and can things like a youth organisation that offers mental health programs or youth engagement programs or a social enterprise cafe, for example? So are there other things that we could consider, even if, you know, we're in this kind of limbo with traders in purples? Can we step in?
CEO. Oh, no, Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor. So traders' lease is until February 2026. There's nothing in the terms of the lease that would enable us to step in without traders first relinquishing that lease, or it would need to be with agreement. But yeah, obviously after February 26, that will be a decision for council as to what they do with the space. But yeah, we have a lease agreement until that date.
Councillor Midgley, you had your light on.
Thank you, Mayor. The State Coastal Policy Position Paper closed today, and I'm just wondering if Council put in a submission for that. It's different, noting to the last one I've asked about regarding the validation bill.
Ms. Shakuti.
Through you, Mayor, we were planning to put a submission in, and I will be requesting extension first thing in the morning. That has been an oversight on my behalf. We have one drafted. The summary of our submission is around needing further consultation and particularly some clarification in relation to the risk that is referred to in their proposed changes in terms of what's an acceptable threshold, and further definition on mobile landforms, as well as what would be considered community benefit or public benefit, sorry, for a development to be approved on those landforms. So we would be encouraging further consultation with more detailed supporting information. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Deputy Mayor.
I was just after an update, please, on the pedestrian crossing at Beach Road.
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, we've just finalised the design for that. That's just going out to tender at the moment, so it should come back to council shortly.
Fantastic, thank you.
Imminent. Potentially imminent. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you. I have a question for closed session.
Thank you. Thank you for foreshadowing that. We will move along then if there's no further questions. So we're on page 3 now, questions on notice and councillors. The first one was from Councillor Cordova in relation to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, with a response from Ms. Shakuti. And the second one from, oh sorry, no, that was the only one on notice. But now we've got the new item that we will put on as required, and that is updates on issues raised by councillors during debates. There was an issue raised by Councillor Antoli, and I believe Ms. Shakuti is going to give a response to that. Are you? No? No, sorry. Sorry, Ms. Tyler-Moore.
Sorry, Mayor, if I could just have a moment.
Yeah, you're right.
Through you, Mayor, sorry, did you want me to just outline
The response to
the
the issue that
response
was
and-
raised, in relation to Aboriginal heritage.
Sorry, on the spot, didn't know it was coming up.
Sorry,
right.
apologies. That's got lost in translation somewhere along the line.
Yes. So at the last council meeting, there were a number of questions that were raised about the process for Aboriginal heritage reports and the need for them. And it was stated several times that, that the department was inconsistent in how they did their approach. And despite pointing out that it wasn't inconsistent, that it was consistent, I had the opportunity to go back and have a look. I did ask for further clarification because it was stated that there were 3 separate developers, 3 separate sites where this had occurred in Huntingfield. The councillor did provide me with a single application where it had occurred or had seemed to occur. Looking at that file, it's very clear that that application, the request for the Aboriginal assessment was actually made by Aboriginal Heritage Tasmania, not council, and that copy of that further information request and that report has been provided to the Mayor and to the CEO, just providing the details about that it's untrue and where it really came from. It also included a clarification of the cost, which is not really relevant to us because we didn't ask for it, but it was brought up. And the statements that were made included that a knowledge of inconsistencies in the department. So I did raise that and provide clarification about the correction of those statements at the meeting.
Thank you very much. Open session of council now adjourns and the Planning Authority commences at 6:06 p.m. We're on page 4, Officers' Reports to Planning Authority. It's for DAS 2024 number 2. I'm not going to read out all the titles and everything. I think we all know this is in relation to Spring Farm Village Shopping Centre. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that is on page 55. Got a mover in the Deputy Mayor and a seconder in Councillor Dean. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I'm really happy to move this one. This proposal is a much needed development, providing a supermarket, doctor's practice and other retail outlets for the rapidly growing Spring Farm and Whitewater suburbs. The development is taking place within the urban growth boundary with the future population growth in mind. I feel confident that all of the representations have been addressed appropriately. We have seen some really great community engagement by the developer. They've hosted various community representations at the Kingborough Community Hub and have held a competition regarding the logo, which references the beautiful views up to Kunani. A big shout out as well to our planning staff on this one. I hear from the developer that the planning staff have been exceptional to work with what has been quite a complex and complicated proposal with so many different titles to sort out, so well done. I know that there are some people in the community who are saddened by the large loss of trees. My reading of the report, though, it seems that the developer has worked tirelessly to do the right thing, including concentrating the development in the more degraded areas of the site. There is 47% of remnant native vegetation, which is proposed to be retained in perpetuity in a reserve, and the developer has even offered to stockpile suitable large logs from felled trees and place them in the offset area to assist with animal habitat, which has been written in, as I believe, in condition 4E. An offset of nearly 65,000 has been conditioned to help manage the bushland reserve as well as address the residual loss of the trees, something that we should be really proud of here in Kingborough, that we address residual loss in this way. So I'm really happy to support this application. It has demonstrated compliance and I note that there are the 32 conditions. I would like to move, however, a slight amendment in regards to condition 13. A number of councillors received some concerns from the developer and I just thank the staff for coming up with some amendment to make it nice and easy for this process.
Point of order.
No. Yep. Councillor Fox, I think you're about to say what I was just querying. I don't think as the mover of the motion you can move an amendment.
Oh,
That's correct.
Yeah, so I can't accept that amendment, but during debate. Obviously, if somebody else wanted to move that amendment, then they would ask you if it was acceptable to you as the mover and also acceptable to Councillor Dean as the seconder. So that takes me to, I can't accept that amendment. We appreciate the intent behind it, but we'll go to other speakers, and I've got Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank the Deputy Mayor for her summary. I also would love to be able to take her up on moving that amendment to condition 13, lucky 13. Does that need to be re-read out to council officers by the mover?
Perhaps I could, oh, we've got it. Okay, we've got
amazing stuff.
There we go.
Powers.
So the amendment is on the screen. So I think the only Councillor Street, what? Oh, okay, right. I thought you were waving to me, but thanks. I know. Nice to see you too. I think the only change of wording is just that first, it's just inserting the words unless otherwise approved by the General Manager in writing. Is that correct? And the word building, right. So, Ms. Tyler Moore.
Through you, Mayor, the change of is the unless otherwise agreed and unless otherwise approved and by the General Manager in writing, and also building works excluding vegetation removal and access works. So the words were slightly changed, and
right.
Obviously the condition can be seen in the agenda.
Okay. So I've got that as a moved amendment by Councillor Antoli and a seconded by Councillor Street. Is that acceptable to the mover? Could you vocalise that, Councillor Dean?
Point of order. Sorry, we've referred to the General Manager, but shouldn't we be referring to the Chief Executive Officer?
They're interchangeable, doesn't matter, but probably for clarity we should probably put the CEO. But they are interchangeable because you may recall that we passed something in relation to that at the time that we changed the name. Okay, Councillor Dean,
yes,
are you happy with that?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so we're now dealing with the amended motion. Councillor Antoli.
Thank you. And as I was saying a moment ago, thank you to our Deputy Mayor in the way that she introduced this. And I'd like to, I've never actually come across a development in Kingborough in my time here where the developer has been so engaged with the community, so proactively engaged with the council. And I've been to every public consultation and even anticipated objections around environmental matters just didn't seem to eventuate. I think it's partly because the developer's been so proactive in addressing those concerns that they sort of evaporated, which is fantastic. I'm excited that this development is going to be so close to the new Huntingfield housing development, of which we know a large number of those homes will be social housing. It'll be wonderful to see those kids getting off buses on their way home, going to Coles, strapping on their uniform, earning some good income, going to contribute to their families. My daughter is about to commence that new part of her life in the next few weeks. So I'm looking forward to getting my family's Coles discounts. I'm sure those families will as well. So I just hats off to Palia for what they've done. Hats off to the way they've engaged. Hats off to the community. They're hungry for it. And I'm not trying to be punny, but they're very hungry for this development. I'd also like to unintentionally embarrass one of our staff and compliment Senior Planner Mr. Donovan, who I have heard nothing but praise from the developer about his proactive response. So please accept our council's thanks for that hard work, because going through the DA, it was massive. And I know you didn't do it alone, you were supported as well. So I just heartily endorse this, and I look forward to a fantastic resolution. We need to get this happening sooner, not later, because the developer has locked up one of the top construction companies to do this piece of work, and it needs to be done by early 2026. Otherwise, the whole development is at risk because they have other projects locked in. So I really encourage council to do their part in making sure that title transfers and rezoning is done as swiftly as possible so that this development is not put at risk. And I trust that the General Manager will be really supportive of getting this happening because clearly the community want it, and as a councillor, I'd like to see it happen as well, and I'm not alone. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Antoli. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. Echo some of the sentiments that have been shared, and yes, it has been, I guess, even since my terms on council, I haven't had such a significant development like this happen, where there has been the community consultation that I've seen occur as well, and I have attended one of those meetings. And yes, with the housing development happening close by, it is an important precinct and shopping area to be developed. And hopefully there'll be lots of places that people can cycle to this development as well. Noting that as well, a lot of members in the community do have mixed feelings about it, and I know they sit outside, you know, my hat as the planning authority, but there is a lot of emotive responses in regards to the beautiful forest that is there, the high conservation trees that aesthetically make, you know, Kingborough the place that it is. And we do community consultation around our values. It is often, you know, the trees and the environmental beauty that people enjoy. I note, as the Deputy Mayor said, in regards to there has been work in regards to the environmental protection zone, the mitigation in regards to the keeping of the logs and things like that. But I just do know that nearly everybody that I speak to has seen that sign is going to be grieving the loss of those trees. Yeah, and so there's no doubt about that. And also the fact that, you know, there is another multi-chain supermarket, and that it is like we live in this sort of like, you know, there's a buy nothing new kind of month, like the economies are changing. And so I guess I just wanted to state that as well in regards to what people are looking for the future as well. But they're outside the planning scheme, and I know that, but I just wanted to mention that. Couple of questions as I move on. So in regards to page 54, and this one often stumps me, but I'd just like to ask that question. As the Aboriginal cultural heritage values are significant, noting there was a permit, but now that's expired, on page 54, can I please sort of explain what the process is now in regards to getting a permit?
Ms. Tullamore.
Through you, Mayor, the Aboriginal relics that are on site are registered sites, so it was already known. It's already been dealt with through the 4 planning permits. We've done it before. Yes, that has expired. It's the responsibility of the developer to engage with Aboriginal Heritage Tasmania as to the requirements that they'll need to go through to resolve any further requirements that they may have in relation to that, and the developer is aware of that.
Great, thank you. A couple of questions in regards to submissions that were put in regarding bicycle parking. So I note that there definitely is some bicycle parking located, but the fact that they're not located kind of close to the shops, the bike hoops are sort of located further away in the kind of car park sort of area shown on the plan. As people have noted, we know there's significant housing development. We've just heard, you know, a young person getting a job, which is fantastic. I see this development as a prime place that young people can be independent and cycle to. So what criteria does it have in regards to sort of putting the bike parking a bit closer to the shop fronts, but also providing secure bike parking for employees? I thought that was a part of a planning provision, that if they have to provide a number of secure bike parking for employees.
Ms. Tullamore.
Through you, Mayor, it is correct, there are requirements for bicycle parking provided in the planning scheme under clause E6, Parking and Access Code, and it's stipulated how many spaces depended on the land use, and how many spaces is determined often on the floor area. So bicycle parking has been provided by the developer, acknowledged it seems to be located more on one side than the other. And yes, there is a requirement about secure bicycle parking. I can see in the report that it hasn't touched on that, and I see in the conditions it doesn't state that. I'm not too sure how it's got to be missed. If councillors felt that it was something that should be included and amended, there is a possibility to amend condition 1 and include that requirement if it was deemed necessary. So there are 3 different classes of bicycle storage and then it stipulates in the tables what they are. But class 1 is security level high, which is a fully enclosed individual lockers, And Class 2 is medium, which is lock compounds with communal access using duplicate keys. And Class 3 is low, facilities with which the bicycle frame and wheels could be locked, so they'd be a normal bike frame. The land uses within the scheme suggest that it could be 1 or 2, so it's optional between fully enclosed individual lockers or a lock compound.
Okay, thank you. That's a lot to take in. And I guess the reason, and thank you very much for finding that information. And the reason I guess why I asked that is because I know a number of young people have their bicycles stolen from, say, leaving there for like a 5-hour shift or something like that. So if it is secure parking, it means they're more likely to actually cycle there or things like that. Even myself, you know, if I was hanging out there for a few hours and I had a good bike, I'd probably want to secure it as well. So through you, Mayor, it seems like a big I'm just not sure where to go through from here in regards to what actually to state and to choose what type of locker. I wouldn't know what to put. So if I can have some advice, please, because I would like to.
Ms Tullamore, can you provide some advice on a suitable amendment?
Through you, Mayor, yes, I can. So you could do it to not be prescriptive of the type of bicycle parking. You could have the preamble say, unless to the satisfaction of the Manager of Development Services, which is how we typically write the conditions. And if you were to insert it into this, you could either insert it as a new condition, but we note that this particular planning application, condition 1, requires amended plans anyway, so it would make sense to put it in there. Just add another letter, letter D, under numeral 1, asking for the provision of bicycle parking you could say in accordance with the requirements of the planning scheme, but that would mean that you're very strictly saying the number. The traffic report that was provided by the applicant made no comment about the bicycle parking, and the planning report that was submitted by the applicant talked about bicycle parking but didn't talk about the lockers, because I've just had the chance to look that up. So you could have a letter D that says parking provision, bicycle parking provision. I love writing conditions on the spot. Bicycle parking provision in accordance with E6 parking and access of the Kingborough Interim Planning Scheme, but to provide flexibility and a discussion with what works best for the developer, because there may be a good space available for it. There might be space available on site to accommodate it. It's a very large site, so I'm sure that something could be considered. It could be bicycle parking provision to the satisfaction of the Manager Development Services to meet the needs of the development, which gives us the discretion to negotiate what we think the suitable number is. If councillors feel that they want a specific number or they want it strictly to adhere to the scheme, then you would say in accordance with the Parking and Access Code. As you'll read in the report, there's a certain number of spaces that were required. I think it was 31, and only 8 are provided. So typically what we would consider in allowing a reduction of the parking numbers, all car parking numbers the same, is we look at the type of development, who's likely to go there. So, for example, a bulky goods site, you're not going to, because people are generally buying bulky goods. They're not going to ride a bicycle, but staff may use it. Are people going to cycle to and from this with the suite of shops that are on offer? You'd need to consider that as well, about how many people are going to be there, and perhaps the hoop parking in addition to the lock parking is a reasonable outcome, rather than saying that they're all in locked up parking.
So, Councillor Midgley, can I just clarify what you're hoping to achieve with an amendment?
Yes.
Whether it is, because I'm slightly confused now as to what amendment you're aiming for.
So
I thought you were aiming for to include secure parking for employees of the retail development.
Yes, so as part of under the planning scheme, I have heard, and again, just late this
So,
afternoon.
yes
yeah,
or
so
no? Yes.
Basically, so that I think I would like to see hooped parking, but also secure parking.
Okay.
As required under the planning scheme, and I'm not sure how it was missed, and sorry I didn't get this forward, before, so that we could not be doing this on the fly.
So, in terms of, we've got the start of some words there that we would need to just to progress this, we'd need to just finalise those words and then ask the mover and seconder if that's acceptable to them before we go any further down this. And I would also need a seconder for the words when we get them. Ms Tyler-Moore, sorry to put you on the spot. Can you finish those words?
Through you, Mayor, I think it would be more appropriate if we're allowed a break to make sure that we're getting the words right, because there'll need to be references in some of the other conditions as well.
Okay.
I had no idea. Sorry.
It should. Yep. It wouldn't take that long.
Okay. Councillor, just a minute. Okay. Well, we might adjourn for 5 minutes just to clarify, to clarify that, because drafting on the fly is really bad, and we try to avoid doing it. But I can see there is a need to do that, and we've kind of got the words not quite. Councillor Fox, did you have a point of order, or?
No, I'm fully supporting Councillor Midgley's suggestion, but I'm also like to consider the fact that a lot more people are using electric bikes now, and they're quite expensive, and you can remove the batteries from them and you can tamper with them quite easily, and they require more secure parking than just a hoop, and especially if people are working at the centre and then want to park with their electric bikes, which we should be encouraging.
Yep.
So that should also be considered in what we're requiring in terms of security.
Okay, all right. I think, Ms Tyler-Moore, does that give you enough to go on for drafting if we take a 5-minute adjournment?
Through you, not through you, back to you, Mayor. Sorry. Yes, it is. I just wonder if there's going to be any other matters that are going to be raised about the application, so that we're not breaking again. If there's anything else,
are there likely to be any other amendments? Can somebody foreshadow that, Councillor Antoli?
No, mine's more of a point of order. This is a lot of work. Have you even read the room as to whether or not we're even going to vote for anything like this? Because we could be just taking time out of the evening for no reason at all. No, democracy is, that's why I'm talking. That's democracy too.
Look, it's part of the planning scheme, so I'm happy to allow it. If it was an issue that was like way out of left field, then we wouldn't go to the trouble of drafting it and putting it to the room. But I believe that the answers that Ms Tyler-Moore has given have demonstrated that there was an omission in this area, so I'm happy for it to proceed. So on that basis, for those people who are watching along at home, I apologise. We're going to take a brief break. Let's come back at 6:35, which is 7 minutes. That was a little bit longer than we anticipated. My apologies to those who are watching along at home. Thank you for your patience while we did some drafting of an amendment. I've also been asked to remind you all that when you speak, can you speak loudly enough so that the recording can pick it up? Because some of you are a little quiet. So if you could make sure you're close enough to the microphone, that would, I'm sure, be appreciated by the people who are trying to watch along at home. So if we pick up where we left off, we have some words now which I'll ask Mrs. Morton to provide us with. So it's inserting a new clause D, whatever clause that is, clause 1, which reads provision of increased bicycle parking, including the provision of secure bicycle parking facilities in accordance with clause E 6.0, parking and access code, to the satisfaction of the manager development services. And then there is, I think, a further amendment that goes hand in hand with that, which is in clause 11A. We've got a new 3, location and specification of the required bicycle parking facilities as required by condition 1D of this permit. Is there more? And which was the one that we just inserted, and a new 25G, installation of required bicycle parking, including the secure spaces. Is that all? Yep. So it's the 3 amendments that are essentially to resolve the one issue that has been raised. So that amendment is proposed by Councillor Midgley. Do I have a seconder? I've got a seconder in Councillor Fox.
Point of order.
Yeah, I'm just coming to the next question, and the next question is that amendment acceptable to the mover or seconder? To the mover, Councillor Gladright?
Look, it's not to me, and I'll preface that by saying I don't fully 100% understand, so I'm going to say no so that it gets debated.
Okay, all right. So we're now debating, we're off the substantive motion and we're now debating the amendment as moved by Councillor Midgley and seconded by Councillor Fox. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. The reason why I put forward this amendment was after chatting to some bicycle experts this afternoon, just going through a few different things on the agenda that relate to cycling. And I found out this is a provision of the planning scheme, so therefore that's why I asked this question. As I stated earlier, it's really important that we provide secure bicycle parking for, say, a young person's working at Coles. They leave their bike there for 5 hours. I've heard that bicycles are stolen in our municipality if they're left there sometimes for a bit longer. If they have an expensive bike, it's great that they can have a secure place to lock them. Some of these provisions are provided in certain areas around at the wetlands and in Margate. So I think it is really important, and it's a requirement of the planning scheme. Perhaps in regards to that first point 1D, if staff might like to sort of explain what that means in case there is any confusion, so hopefully we can get this across the line, like for the health and wellbeing of our community.
Thank you. Ms. Tyler-Moore.
Through you, Mayor. So just to be clear, I'll just go over all 3 of them. The 1D relates to, so condition 1 requires amended plans to be submitted because there's other changes we want to the plan. So we're suggesting an approval on the condition that they submit these amended plans. And so to add it in there means that we'll be able to consider it. The actual wording, if Ms. Morton doesn't mind scrolling down, sorry, is saying provision of increased bicycle parking, including the provision of secure bicycle parking. So we've said increase because they do have some bicycle parking, hoop parking. We're suggesting increase, so not just replacing, let's just take the hoops out and put the secure in, because the hoops are easily accommodated anyway. The provision of secure bicycle parking facilities in accordance with clause E 6.0, because then we can go back to the planning scheme about what that counts as secure bicycle parking. And we've referenced the code, and it's to such satisfaction of the manager development services. So that provides some discretion to work with the developer about what is appropriate for that site. So as I mentioned earlier, it may not be to the letter of how many the planning scheme says. If the councillors would want that, then it should be explicit in there. We would negotiate what we think is reasonable on that site and how many bicycle parking should be used for that. Often it would be looking, the assessment would look at other similar developments and what's provided and what's used, but that hasn't been provided by the traffic engineer. So it gives that flexibility. But certainly taking the sentiments of what's said in the chamber in mind, and the points are valid and are still planning considerations, reminding everyone they've got to stay on what is in the planning scheme, that we can accommodate that on the site and meet the needs of the community. The following conditions, the second one that we've amended is just the condition that requires for the amended engineering drawings. So we always ask for engineering drawings for complicated sites like this afterwards. It's just the really detailed drawings. So it's just saying, show us the internal road network, show us the external joining roads, and now we've added show the specifications for the bicycle parking, so we make sure it's not in conflict and it's not taking away the parking spaces that are meant to be there for the cars. And then the last one that we might change is the condition that requires things to be done before the buildings are occupied. So we might require them to do the parking areas and the landscaping, etc. And we've included installation of the required bicycle parking, just to be specific that it must go in before they start occupying the shops.
Thank you, Ms Tyler-Moore. Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to Councillor Dean for triggering the debate. I do appreciate it because I myself was a bit confused. So thank you for being honest and speaking my mind as well. So can I get clarification? So there was a comment made by the manager of planning that this was probably an oversight. So what was on the plans was not enough, or this improves it to community expectations? Why have we taken this route?
Ms Tyler-Moore.
Through you, Mayor, the clause parking and access code has lots of elements in it. It includes the parking, as the name suggests, and the access. It also requires the bicycle parking. So you can see in the report it clearly was assessed the number of bicycle parks that were required, but what's been omitted is the requirement for the secure parking. So that's now addressing this.
And that's a requirement, is it?
It is a requirement to have the secure parking for certain types of uses of a certain number. Council can have discretion to waive that requirement or reduce the requirement, the same as we can with vehicle parking.
Okay, thank you. I'm persuaded to vote for this based on the explanation so far.
Thank you, Councillor Antoli. Other further contributions? Councillor Fox.
Just that I note on page 39, under the proposal, the third dot point down, it states that the council's development engineer has reviewed the bicycle parking provided and agrees that there is adequate parking spaces on the site to provide for any likely bicycle parking demand. So I think by increasing the bicycle parking to secure parking, there is obviously room to cater for that. So I can't see any objection. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dean.
Yeah, look, I can kind of picture secure bicycle parking in my mind, but it was referred to that it was in the code. But I just would maybe like an explanation of what it is that we're here requiring, because we have secure parking in different parts of the municipality, but they are not before a massive shopping centre as being proposed here. They might be in not dark areas that might not have the passive surveillance as this does. So I guess there are different types or requirements of secure parking. So if I could just get a bit more info on that, please.
Ms Tyler-Moore.
Through you, Mayor, there's a number of bicycle parking, secure bicycle parking available. So councillors might be familiar with the ones down at the wetlands where there are individual boxes, if you like. So they're very enclosed, they're quite chunky and big, and take up a lot of space for what it actually is. That's sort of one form. The other form, which is often seen at park and rides or at train stations in states that have trains, is basically a pen, and you have a key. So you sign up to it, you're granted a key or a swipe to be able to get in there, and you hang your bike in your location or secure it in there. So yes, you could still get something stolen off your bike in there by someone else who is in the pen, but certainly it's an accepted provision of secure parking. So for this site, I think that we'll need to look at what best suits the site, and also whether it's a covered pen or not, and it would need to be accommodated within the site. Does that answer the question?
Councillor Dean, anything further?
I guess what I'm hearing there is it's not fairly prescriptive. We're not imposing something here without, I suppose, being engineered. As Councillor Fox has pointed out, the original report says it was sufficient. So we're now imposing something additional on there that may or may not be necessary, and I'm not an engineer, so I can't really add much, but it sounds like that there is, we're not setting a cumbersome minimum here, and that was, sorry, in terms of standard, but we're also not setting a minimum in terms of quantity. Is that also correct?
That's correct. There's no number in this.
All right. Given the, that, then I think that sounds like a reasonable request.
Thank you. Councillor Antoli?
Thank you. Question just from what Councillor Dean said. So if there's no, if we're not being prescriptive, can a council officer then choose a number and hold the developer to it, and he or she has to do as they're told if they're not happy?
Ms. Tullamore.
Through you, Mayor, we would base it on information we have available to us, as well as the provisions of the planning scheme, so it would be a qualified assessment. It is likely that we would consider negotiating that with the applicant about what space is available, because as an example, we wouldn't necessarily want to lose all the landscaping just to put the bicycle parking in. If councillors were not comfortable with that and wanted to have a minimum provision, then a minimum number could be provided in the condition. But I think that would be guessing the number more than officers guessing it. And obviously we work in the field all the time, and we can appreciate what the purpose of the bicycle parking is for, to come up with a reasonable number. Yes, you could end up, in the worst case scenario, stalemate with the applicant that we disagree because it's to the satisfaction of the manager of development services. But the same can be said for several conditions, but it's not something that usually occurs.
Thank you.
Councillor Dean.
Another clarifying question just on at the back of that. We aren't therefore, again, this is going to have a mix of different bicycle parking, some less robust or secure as the others. This leaves that interpretation open to discussion.
Correct.
Okay, not every single bicycle park needs to be in a cage then?
No.
Great.
Any further discussion or questions on the amendment? Councillor Cordova.
Thank you. Just to say that I support it. I think it's good. It fits in with the planning scheme. It'll also improve the health and wellbeing of, and just make it more accessible, both for staff and other people. So I think it's a good thing. And kudos to Councillor Midgley for raising it at what was a very opportune time. I think there will be a lot of people for a lot of years who will be very grateful that this change was made. So thank you.
Thank you. If any further discussion on the amendment, Councillor Midgley, did you want to sum up on the amendment? Okay, I'm going to put the amendment. It's as we have, or the amendment is to add clauses 1D, 11.3 and 25G to the conditions, and we've already gone through what those additional clauses are. So it was moved by Councillor Midgley and seconded by Councillor Fox. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. The amendment now becomes part of the substantive motion. So we are back on the substantive motion. Councillor Midgley, did you want to continue your contribution?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mayor. And I have made a bit of a contribution and just have one more question, again, in regards to some of the representations that were put forward regarding this, noting, and again, thank you to the developer for considering this as well. The area proposed to be retained is located with the environmental management zone, pages 41 to 43 of the report there, and it outlines the ongoing conservation management plan and also the Part 5 agreement, just so that the community can understand the vegetation and the environmental aspects that are going to be retained as part of this development. Could, through you, Mayor, ask staff to perhaps outline some of the key aspects of the ongoing environmental management plan and the Part 5 agreement, and how do we also ensure that this vegetation will be retained forever?
Ms. Tullamore. Oh, no, Mr. Donovan.
Through you, Mayor, thank you. So the plan and the Part 5 work together, and what they're about is making sure that we receive the land in a good state. So there will be some works done in regards to that. It also means that there's clear guidelines as to how that land will be looked after and managed in the future. It will be owned by council, so we'll be looking after it. The conditions on the permit guarantee that it will be maintained for its purpose, which is to provide for that bushland and to be managed and maintained in that state. It won't be able to be used for other purposes that council would perhaps think land like that could be. It couldn't be developed for further uses. The zone will remain, but also have the Part 5 as protection. It also means that council understands quite clearly what its obligations are moving forward. So it's in effect preserved as it is going forward. It also means that in terms of other aspects like clearing, land management, other uses, they're controlled. As a private land can be as well. We do use the Part 5s under the planning scheme for that purpose. We believe it's a way that we can achieve the scheme's outcomes in terms of conservation and management going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Midgley, anything further? Your light's not on.
Sorry,
Thanks.
I just have one more question, sorry. I'll wait and I'll find my next question, sorry.
Okay, further contributions. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I agree with what everyone said so far, pretty much. I think it's excellent development, and I think the staff have done a fantastic job because it's a huge development, and the report we've received is very, very detailed, so kudos to them. One thing that hasn't been mentioned so far, which I've received a fair bit of feedback from the community about, is the traffic impact. So I just wanted to query a few questions through you, Mayor, on some of the traffic assessment report. As far as I can read, the report's telling us that the Channel Highway traffic volumes will increase from approximately 12,900 per day to 19,720, so around 50%. And in peak hour, we're talking 1,200 to 1,956, which is about 60%. And I think even in the report it notes that there's currently some issues during peak hour where we see traffic banked all the way back up to Mertonvale Circuit. And if we're talking an extra 60% on top of that, it sounds quite a lot. So I just wonder if we could get the staff to give us an overview of the traffic report and whether there's any concerns at all.
Mr. Donovan, thank you.
I'll do my best. I'm not the engineer, but I have read the reports and I guess know a little bit about it. Yes, you're quite right. The area is growing and so is traffic. The traffic report, which we've had a look at and also has state growth, has come to the conclusion that based on those growth rates, the extra traffic being added to by this development is able to be accommodated and the road can handle it, in simple terms. So based on that advice, we've recommended the approval. We have required some upgrade to the road at the front and also on Spring Farm Road intersection. So based on those works and also the additional lanes and turning in lanes, it's the engineer's view that the application is adequate in terms of catering for its traffic. The impact from the traffic, as I said, is able to be handled by the road capacity going forward. Our state growth haven't raised any objections as well and have supported the application. And in fact, the applicant was changed to accommodate two concerns from state growth in the process. One of those was extra footpaths, particularly down Spring Farm Road, and also in relation to a further pedestrian crossing and refuge over the main road.
Councillor Bain.
Thank you. Obviously not going to disagree because we've got the expert traffic impact assessment saying that it complies. But I think it is a big increase, so to me it points to a lot of the impact that we're seeing at this roundabout is from the Algana roundabout. So one, council need to be pushing state government to have that work done sooner rather than later. There's other areas that council can contribute in terms of pushing ahead with trying to work on a resolution for getting the link road through Spring Farm up to Summerlees, because this is a lot of traffic, I believe. So I think if we can work to some better outcomes for the residents, it would be a good thing. But all in all, as everyone said, I think it's a great development. The staff done a great job. There's a lot of good outcomes here. I think it's a good balance in terms of it is a block full of trees. We're retaining half of those, which is a good outcome. They've ticked off all the things around in terms of I've read about a wildlife spotter when the trees are being taken down. Some of the work's not being done during the swift parrot breeding season. So every box that I can see has been ticked, and I think it's going to be a good outcome for the community.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. Further discussions on the substantive motion? Councillor Cordover.
Thank you, Mayor. Briefly, I think that my main concern, and that raised by the majority of the representations, were around environmental impacts, and so I think it's worth noting. I think the thing that I found comforting was, as has been explained by Councillor Midgley, but if you look to between page 41 and 43, including the extensive offsets, I think there's some obvious issues with offsets, the time horizon and things like that. But my first question on this is just about I'm looking at D, this is 4D on page 57, must be overseen by a wildlife spotter to identify and respond to any displaced wildlife in accordance with the endorsed construction environmental management plan required under condition 8. My question is, who chooses the wildlife spotter? Is that in-house? Is that like a council person that does that, or is that a contractor, or how does that get arranged?
I didn't even know a wildlife spotter was a job. Mr. Donovan.
Through you, Mayor, thank you. No, we don't choose that person. It's requiring on the developer to do that while the construction's happening. The approved plans, the conservation management plan and the Part 5s clearly spell out that's a qualified person we'd recognise. Yeah.
Thank you. So through you, Mayor, just to finish off this idea of the environmental impacts and the limited extent to which I'm comforted by the really extensive work that's been done both with council and the proponent to try and, I guess, negotiate around protecting our precious places. The fact is that the zoning in the aspect and the area of this site means that it was likely to be some kind of commercial development, whether it's a bulky goods store or whether it becomes a shopping centre. It was unlikely to ever become, a permanent refuge for wildlife. And I think it's reasonable to understand that when we're trying to economically develop in an environmentally sustainable way, there are always compromises and trade-offs that get made. And here is one such example of compromises and trade-offs where in total 47% of the remnant native vegetation is proposed to be retained, including all of the eucalyptus ovata forest and woodland and swift parrot foraging habitat. I think that I'm really interested about the Chaos skipper habitat. I just don't, my understanding is that not enough research is really being done on where the Chaos skipper is being found and identified, and basically more research needs to be conducted. But again, look, this is why we need citizen scientists and more resources put into that area. I think it's easy for somebody flippantly to say, well, it's opposite of Bunnings, it's unlikely to be the last refuge of the Chaos skipper, but really the science isn't really in. But if you turn to page 42, you can see a photo of the part of the proposed Lot 2 to be transferred to council as a reserve. These are high conservation value trees. If we are to protect urban habitat, swift parrot habitat, this is a good example of that. So it's sustainable development to some extent, which comforts me. My question around, very briefly, we have heard about Aboriginal heritage, and my understanding from the answer that we received was essentially this is an issue for Aboriginal Heritage Tasmania, but it does say in the report that that there's Aboriginal heritage values of high significance, and I assume that council obviously wants those to be protected. So is it just enough to advise the developer to talk to Aboriginal Heritage Tasmania, or is there some more active role in facilitation that council is doing to protect the Aboriginal heritage of high significance? That's a quote from the report. So what else are we doing to facilitate that protection? And because if we're completely hands-off, how do we know that the developer and Aboriginal Heritage Tasmania do take it forward?
Ms. Tyler-Moore.
Through you, Mayor, the matter of the Aboriginal relics on site were raised with the applicant very early in the further information requests. So they were certainly aware of it, and it was flagged. Under LUPA, we don't have, Land Use Planning Approvals Act, we don't have any obligations to do with the Aboriginal heritage, as I've made previous comments about. So we limited in what we can do, putting the note in there and making them aware. I believe Aboriginal Heritage Tasmania has also been notified of it. And if they were to go and do development with that out in place, as anyone can, as an authority, we can report that to Aboriginal Heritage Tasmania, but there's little else that we can do to tie it together.
Thank you.
Councillor Cordover.
My penultimate point, Mayor, is around active transport, and as I said before, I really do appreciate the work that everybody did, and particularly leading that Councillor Midgley to ensure that there's secure bike parking. there's an upgrade to the road that we've heard about, Spring Farm Road, and we've heard about state growth not having any issues, so to speak. But we can reduce traffic by making active transport easier, and every development is obviously an opportunity to extend separated cycleways, wayfinding, street furniture, end-of-trip facilities. Is the council satisfied with the active transport options as proposed in this application? And what are the active transport implications around this proposal? Specifically, what I'm trying to work out is, I'd kind of like it explained to me, please, how council has worked with the developer in this case to consider active transport and options to make us healthy by design. Are we getting more separated cycleways to get into the venue? Like, we've heard that we're going to increase the size of Spring Farm Road, but what, with respect to wayfinding, cycleways, street furniture and end-of-trip facilities, has council negotiated with the developer?
Mr. Donovan.
Through you, Mayor, thank you. The concept you've mentioned is not specifically identified in our parking and access code or traffic code. You're talking about, I guess, modern concepts to a degree that people embrace and want to achieve. So we haven't actually had an actual conversation about that particular matter. We've certainly assessed it against the codes, as the report says. In relation to the upgrading of the Channel Highway, it has the adequate width to provide for those facilities. It's in accordance with our agreed plan with state growth for the whole of that Channel Highway, and it's upgrading, and you may be aware of some of that, which we're doing as we can in terms of providing bike lanes and footpaths. So we've guaranteed that the road can be upgraded for those facilities when council and state growth decide to do that. There's no specific provision in the scheme to require the developer to upgrade those actual road facilities. So it's been assessed and approved in accordance with our codes.
Thank you.
Councillor Cordova.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, final point is about economic impact, and this relates to some of the representations. I'll quote one of the representations from one of the consultants that said, quote, "It is considered that the location is appropriate for peripheral sales and bulky goods retailing typologies," and then this representation goes on to say, quote, "It is considered that the proposal may have significant economic impact on the ongoing viability of nearby activity centres, including the Kingston Plaza Shopping Centre," end quote. My question is, firstly, is the displacement or dispersal of economic activity a relevant consideration for the planning authority? And the second part of that question is it true that, as the representation claims, they say that, quote, "No economic analysis or other justification for this statement is provided in any application material to provide credibility for that statement," end quote. My question is that true? And yeah, is that a planning matter?
Mr. Donovan.
I think I heard three questions. Through you, Mayor, I think I heard three questions. I'll do my best.
Thank you.
I've forgotten what they were now.
Let's start again with the first one.
Okay, so
yes.
the first one is economic dispersal or displacement. Is that our problem as a planning authority?
So to be honest with you, straightforward, no. The scheme doesn't provide any assessment or requirement for that. What the scheme does, to say the obvious, is set the zones up and lets the free enterprise decide how to use them in terms of the approved uses. So in this case, we don't enter into the debate about is it too much retail, Coles versus Woolies or IGO, whoever. That's not a relevant concern for us to look at. In relation to the application, didn't require the applicant to lodge any economic assessment to us. There's no code or requirement for that. It wasn't provided with the initial documentation given to us for the application. I will point out, though, that in response to the submissions we received, which we advised the applicant about, they have provided the council with a copy of an economic analysis, which they did prepare pre-lodgement for their own purposes. And it provided some insights into the question you've asked about the impacts on the area and what that means for various retailers. I guess to summarise it, it provided some modelling and advice to indicate that in the consultant's opinion in the economic report, there was room, I guess, for the additional retail uses to establish without having a negative impact on the existing CBD.
Thank you.
Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. To conclude, as the planning authority, I think that this does fit within the planning scheme. It's a very extensive report and it outlines responses to those representations adequately, in my opinion. And also, I think there's a happy coincidence here of strategic wants that within our council strategic plan, we want, this is 3.1, a council that values and prioritises its natural environment whilst encouraging investment and economic growth. And I think this proposal will do both of those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Councillor Street, in a big, loud voice, near the microphone.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I intend to keep my contribution relatively brief because I think pretty much everything that needs to be said about this development application has been said, but it would be remiss of
Be
me
good if you could say it louder, though.
not to at least put on record my position in relation to the DA, which is that I do believe that it fits within all of the relevant acceptable solutions and performance criteria relevant under the scheme. I agree with Councillor Cordova that the proposal is an excellent example of balance between development and environmental outcomes. Councillor Cordova didn't want to be the one to say it, so I'll be the one to say it. It's opposite of Bunnings. I think it's unlikely to be the final remaining habitat for the Kaistola skipper. Notwithstanding that, there is a significant proportion of that potential habitat that's retained, and I think that's fantastic. Did give me cause to find out that the Kaistola skipper is a butterfly, which I didn't know before.
Did you think it was a bird?
I did think it was a bird until I looked it up. Those matters notwithstanding, I again say that I think the development application fits within all of the relevant criteria of the planning scheme. Thank the developer for the way that they've engaged with both council and the community. To my mind, that's been an example for others to follow in future for developments like this and of this size. So certainly appreciate that and commend the motion to council.
Thank you. Any further speakers on the substantive motion? If not, before I ask Councillor Gladwright if she'd like to sum up, I just wanted to say a few words and I guess largely echo some of the comments from around the table. I think this has been a very worthwhile debate, and I thank Councillor Midgley for bringing the issue of the bicycle parking, but also particularly the secure parking for young people who might be employed at the centre. If I look back to when I moved into Kingborough 35 years ago, I think if, I remember thinking then, gee, it's a strange place, isn't it? There's 3 different shopping centres. And now I appreciate how much we do need an additional supermarket and shopping centre facilities because of the huge growth that we've experienced in that time. So I must admit I was a bit perplexed sometimes seeing public comments saying, oh, we don't need another supermarket. Well, the figures suggest that we do, and my practical experience of circling car parks and things like that show that we are experiencing such an influx in population that we do have the population to support an additional facility. And maybe it's just me because I'm a bit keen on retail, but I'm very keen on the additional outside of a supermarket, what might appear there. I mean, I've given up all hopes of us ever getting an IKEA in Kingston, but I think that went out. When we saw Big Box, we all got excited about that. Look, I just wanted to also thank the developer for the engagement with the community, the number of public meetings, the advertising, the commitment to work for the benefit of some local charities, I think has been also very much appreciated by those. And it's great that the community has been able to have a say in what they want to see there. I do acknowledge, as Councillor Midgley and others have, that there will be many people in the community who will be sad to see the trees cut down, but they're not all coming down. And we do need to accept that sometimes it's that balance between development and the needs of a growing community and balancing that with the environment. And I do hope that people can see that is sometimes a difficult choice, and there are choices that need to be made, but I feel very confident that we've put in place a lot of checks and balances within this permit. and have worked effectively together with the developer to see the best outcome for that site and for the community. So, having said that, Councillor Gladwright, did you want to sum up? Okay, I'm going to put the motion, which is an amended motion. It's moved by Councillor Gladwright. It was seconded by Councillor Dean. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried unanimously. That now brings us to Planning Authority now adjourns at 7:15 p.m. and the open session of Council now recommences at 7:15 p.m. We are now on petitions still being actioned. There are no petitions still being actioned. Thank you. We are on page 142, petitions received in last period. We have a petition that was received in relation to pedestrian and accessible crossing to Meredith's Orchard with a recommendation on page 142. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for that. I've got a mover in Councillor Fox and a seconder in Councillor Midgley. Councillor Fox, do you want to speak to that?
Generally, we don't speak to petitions being received, but I think this is one worth considering. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Otherwise, I'll put it. No? Okay. Moved by Councillor Fox, seconded by Councillor Midgley. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Officers' reports to councils. Page 142, Margate Main Street Master Plan with a recommendation on page 144. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder. I've got a mover in Councillor Midgley, seconder Councillor, oh, so many hands, Councillor Bain. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to support this excellent master plan before us, noting it is so very detailed. There is so much information there to take in, and I thank the consultants for all of their work and all of the staff as well, and all the people who put in representations. Just a bit of a summary from me. You know, town centres are important. They can be the heart of local communities. If we work towards them being inviting, a place to stop, stick, stay and spend, and we also look at traffic calming and all of that sort of to encompass this. And this master plan really does look at that. It provides a great detail into what we can look towards for the future. It keeps in mind a variety of community needs, a vision of a vibrant and traffic calming civic space. And it provides a vision as well that staff can then look for applying grants. We can look at this in our future budgets, and we've got an aim in the future, and we know that the Margate community has definitely been calling out for some changes in this space. We've provided a wide range of options, and a lot of people have put feedback in regards to that. I'd like to highlight just a couple of points. I think the landscape design the landscape design elements are really important. There's no elephant.
No
sorry,
elephants in
no. We've already
Margate.
got one at the Margate train, so we don't need another elephant. No. So the landscape design elements are really important, and we know that when we did the consultation in regards to the main street in Kingston, that was a very high, I guess, wish for the community. They wanted you know, street trees and landscaping. So we can see the really thorough, detailed plan in regards to that. The traffic calming measures are also really important, and the bike riding elements, the shared path, the 2 travel lanes, and we don't want to compromise there in regards to we want to have a 3-metre path, and I think that's really important as well. Couple of questions that I have. 4.7.3, and sorry, I haven't got that page number in front of me, but it was just in regards to
Page 143.
Page 143. Sorry, I've just got to quickly find that one. Didn't write it on my notes. That was just in regards to the additional details of recommended on-road parking lengths to improve the ease of on-road parking and assist minimising additional congestion. I'm just wondering, what does that mean? Will it be in line with the Australian Ausroad standards in regards to that point?
Mr. Reeve.
Through Mayor, yes it will. I guess this is just to make it a bit easier to get people to get in and out of parking spaces more than anything. So there's some guidelines that are through the various standards there, and it still fits within those.
Great, thank you. And I note that some of the submissions, they're quite sort of more for that detailed design type end. So I think it was Cycling South and Bicycle Network Tasmania. They've requested like things like sealed path, pedestrian refuge points, and also in regards to like wayfinding signage and things like that. So when we are looking at the detailed design, will we go back to some of those submissions and input that people have made when we sort of plan for that for the future?
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, yeah, so none of this stuff actually gets lost, so obviously we're going to take this into account when we get to the point of actually doing any of the areas that are recommended. Obviously, as has sort of been mentioned in the workshop and in the report as well, it's a stage type project, so some of the items are quite longer term and some of the other items are much shorter term. So certainly for the shorter term ones there, the comments have got particular relevance to and would be considered as part of that.
Thank you. So in regards to the shorter term and longer term, I guess what is next and what kind of can the community see, say, over the next 12 months?
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, so we want to continue working with state growth, in particular with the pedestrian crossings, bearing in mind that this entire project actually came from getting more accessible crossings across main roads, so that'll be our key priority. But there's also some smaller type ones that we'd like to work on as well. So some of the things such as the signage and wayfinding, I guess, are easier to implement, lower cost, and provide, good value. But certainly the pedestrian crossings will be our number one priority.
Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, just thank you to all the people that put in feedback. There's been a couple of great amendments that have come from the feedback, so it's always worthwhile having a say. The first one I noted is the amendment to the concept trail network. So we're now linking up, the main channel highway up Sandfly Road all the way to Narina Road, which is great. An extra connection all the way to Narina Road. And just following up on the crossings, can I just ask, will it be state growth leading that project or will council be leading that project?
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, it's a good question. Obviously, state growth has taken the lead in terms of doing a design for the crossing. I would suspect that we would be looking at covering part of those costs, and we'd be trying to get state growth to actually cover part of those costs as well, because it's effectively a shared responsibility to a degree. But it's certainly something that we'll be looking at, I guess, finalising the design part of it first, and then looking to actually try and get it into our budget sequence.
Thanks.
Councillor Bain, anything further? Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. I applaud all the work that's gone into this, and I thank the community for their participation and engagement. I thank particularly staff for a huge body of work, and I wanted to spend my brief contribution discussing this notion of risk in, you can see it on page 144 under 8.1, 8.2. There's a risk, and this is me quoting the report, there's a risk that the local community mistake the master plan to be funded and ready for implementation. This is not the case and needs to be clearly communicated going forward. It goes on to say there's also no specific timeframes for implementing project proposals at this stage, as funding commitments would need to be secured before council progresses individual proposals, end quote. The point that I want to make is that I don't see this so much as a risk as an enormous opportunity. By having shovel-ready projects, by having grant, by having the ability to show really well thought out, well crafted and comprehensive ideas for what the community wants to see in their neighbourhood, that puts us in a very good position to get further funding. And that's really, I see, the only kind of basis for a sensible way of picturing the community that we want to live in 10 and 20, 30 and 50 years. If you don't do that kind of forward planning, I think there's a real risk, particularly in politics, and it happens everywhere, where people are so focused on this short term, what's going to happen in 3-4 years, what's going to happen in the next election cycle. This is a visionary document that says, well, this is what our community could look like, and now we have the plans in place to actually go out there and achieve it. So to me, I find that this is a critical opportunity to invest, to plan for the future, and I really do heed the calls of the community throughout the consultation. These ideas about bringing nature into the centre and having street trees and making these places, walkable and beautiful and safe. There's so many good ideas, and I think that the process so far has been really good, and I actually do value how thorough it has been. I know that there's been some consternation about, you know, whether it's too much for a little town like Margate to get, you know, all of this very comprehensive planning. And I actually do think it's critical because it gives us the tools that we need to go out there and get the money to make it happen. So even though we need to be very clear in setting expectations that, no, we don't have the money yet, no, we don't have the timeframes yet, what this says is that we're a visionary council that has a plan. The plan's on paper for all of us to read, and I think that that's very exciting. No risk, no reward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Mayor. Similarly, I think this is an important investment into the future of residential property values into the Margate community. As a resident of Margate now, it's even more, I suppose, acute for me. I'm a unrepentant free market capitalist and also property owner. So I think the Margate peeps are going to love the fact that we're putting some thought and planning into how we develop Margate, because they are going to benefit from it. I have a question. I don't know if anyone can answer it. There is obviously a shopping centre being developed behind the new shops there on the main road. Is there an update as to when that will be completed, and if an anchor tenant has been secured by the developer? Does anyone have an update on that?
Yeah, it's a Woolworths.
It is a Woolworths.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
No, we've been told that previously.
Okay, I don't recall that, so I might have missed that one. And do we have an idea as when it is likely to be opened? Because the council has had a long time investment in this whole process.
The CEO has recently met with the Kalis Group, so he might be able to provide us with an update.
Through you, Mayor. So yes, we do have meetings with the Kalis Group every so often on a range of topics. Recent conversations haven't related to that specific development, and I don't have a specific timeline that I can provide you, but we will talk with both the Kalis Group and our planning staff to understand where that's at.
Fantastic. And the only thing I'd add is well done to council for commissioning the actual plan and getting it out there with the community. The feedback, as the report said, has been 100% positive, and I look forward to more of these down the channel as we grow.
Any further discussion? No, thank you. Councillor Midgley, did you want to close the debate? I'm going to put the recommendation moved by Councillor Midgley, seconded by Councillor Bain. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Takes us to page 197, Land Transfer Kingborough Sports Precinct, with a recommendation on page 198. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Hello, wake up. Moved Councillor Cordova, seconded Councillor Midgley. Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the report to clarify the exact area of land to be transferred to the state government for the construction of the Jack Jumpers High Performance Training Centre. This has been the subject of fairly extensive conversation, both within the council in terms of workshops, but also in terms of the communication that's taken place. For example, as you can see in 7.1, the size of the new lot is consistent with public consultation on this matter, which referred to the site of the Hobart Radio-controlled car club and did not specify the exact area for transfer. So basically, due to the requirement for legal frontage onto Kingston View Drive as part of the creation of this new lot for the development of the High Performance Centre, the exact area of land to be transferred to the state government is 7,785 square metres. I look forward to hearing any discussion that councillors have, but I commend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Councillor Street.
Look, I only have one query, and that is whether or not we did a bit of a cost-benefit analysis between transferring the additional land or gazetting Twin Ovals Road, or Twin Ovals, whatever it's called, as a public road. Whether that was even a possibility, I suppose.
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, not so much a cost-benefit analysis, but certainly the timing was the major issue. The time that it would take to get Twin Ovals Road a proclaimed road would have meant that it would push back the whole transfer and subdivision process. And obviously, time is of the essence from the Jack Jumpers perspective in relation to getting this facility built.
More than satisfied with that answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Street. Councillor Midgley, did you have your light on earlier? No. Councillor Fox.
Just another question, and I guess I'm always concerned about the use of disposal of land, but I understand that this is going to the government, but we did talk about transferring it back to council or having a clause or a condition in the future. If that was, could I have reassurance that that is included in this contract?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, certainly that is the case. All conditions relating to council's approval previously will certainly still stand. The purpose of this report was simply to clarify the exact area for reasons of transparency primarily.
Any further discussion? Councillor Cordover, did you want to close the debate?
Thank you. Yeah, just to sum up, to say that I'm really glad that Councillor Fox raised that. That's the community feedback that I've been hearing about, because there was this original discussion around the revisionary clause that basically said, to my understanding, that if it changes from use away from a basketball high performance centre, then the land will revert back to council. So that's the clause that I expect to be reading. Obviously I haven't read it yet because I assume it hasn't yet exactly been drafted. But what the purpose of this report is before us is largely procedural in nature. Is that before we talked about, yes, we're going to transfer this land, and now we're talking about it is specifically 7,785 square metres, which is consistent with what went to public consultation. So that is the site around the old Hobart Radio Controlled Car Club. So I think that this is just another step forward in what should be a positive project. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to put the recommendation now, moved by Councillor Cordover, seconded by Councillor Midgley. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Takes us to page 200, land lease Leslie Vale Oval, with a recommendation on page 202. I've got a mover in Councillor Gladwright, seconder in Councillor Dean. Councillor Gladwright.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to consider a potential lease of land for a telecommunications tower at Leslie Vale Oval. This will provide revenue generation and improved mobile coverage, and I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Antoli. Okay. Councillor Dean.
Just to add to that, a couple of points that might be of interest, that it is going to be a significantly high tower, 40 metres, but the report does a really good job of explaining, I guess, some of the history. I mean, there's been a couple of examples in my neck of the woods where such towers have met some fierce resistance and haven't gone ahead. So I'm glad that a potential site here has been located and won't be anywhere near, clearly, from the aerial image of where someone would likely hit a 6 or run into. So very good to see.
And for what you've told us about your cricket previously, definitely not you hitting that 6. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't be hitting a 6, just learnt to overarm bowl. But anyway, so I've got a question just around the communication and consultation. Can I please have an understanding what that will look like? And we'll say the Leslie Community Group be notified as well, please.
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor. So there's 2 statutory community advertising processes associated with this. The first is the one under the Local Government Act that requires council to advertise twice in a daily circulating newspaper, a public notice advertising its intent. We are required to post a notice on the site adjoining the highway. That is the first statutory process. The second statutory process will occur if and when council give approval for the use of the land and there is a development application lodged. It's almost certain that this development would require a development application, which would be subject to a advertising process. And then council would do over and above in terms of the statutory process. We would certainly advise the Leslie Vale Community Association of this potential lease of the land in their local area.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councillor Gladwright, do you want to sum up? No, I'll put the recommendation then, moved by Councillor Gladwright, seconded by Councillor Dean. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. Takes us to page 203, Active Transport Positive Provision Policy, with the recommendation on page 204. Got a mover in Councillor Midgley, seconded Councillor Bain. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm really happy to move this Active Transport Positive Provision Policy. It has been on the KBAC, Kingborough Bicycle Advisory Committee agenda for quite a while. Many passionate members interested in pursuing this and asking Council to pursue this. So I thank staff for the work in putting this together, going back to KBAC, going back to staff and making sure that you know, everybody has had a say. In regards to that, we can see that 4.1, the policy aims to ensure that active transport and micro-mobility needs are proactively considered in the planning, design and construction of new council infrastructure, including buildings and roads, road upgrades and ongoing infrastructure maintenance. We know that it is really important in regards to planning, initial planning and also mitigating for the future, and also it has a lot of risk and safety elements as part of this policy as well. As I said, it's been a long-standing item from KBAC. Other councils have this. It's part of the cycling strategy, action item 11, and I'm quite sure, if I recall correctly, the state government also are looking at upgrading theirs. So we can also see that it, in the policy, that it provides for the whole of council approach, just not say like a footpath for a footpath's sake, or we're building a footpath, we consider like all active transport users. So definitely that understanding the 3 metre wide path is really important for all active transport users. You note if you're walking along a footpath that isn't 3 metres and there's someone cycling, then you'll understand that concept as well. We also understand that the risk is also important, so in regards to if they are doing any road works or upgrades there, that the positive provisioning policy allows, you know, to make sure that the contractor puts out the cones, the signage and does the sweeping, that they don't, I guess some of these things were raised because, you know, people who are riding along a bike path, and there's a roadworks sign in the middle of the bike path, and you say riding along Taroona, and you have to kind of go out onto the traffic. So therefore, having this positive provisioning policy kind of mitigates that. So I guess that contractors, and that's a question that I'll ask in a minute around sort of how contractors are made aware of this. But yeah, it's a really important policy. It keeps, you know, all people who are using active transport, you know, safe, hopefully mitigates any risks. And also the bicycle committee, like we've even had some members on the group, for example, with some of the grates, that their wheels have, you know, gone into the grates, have had severe accidents. So this positive provisioning policy also states, you know, provisions and things around that as well when we are having new developments. But I guess, yeah, in regards to when we are putting out our tenders for assessment for any infrastructure, I guess, that are related to this positive provisioning policy, will the people be provided this policy so that they can therefore put all of their costs into this design rather than just kind of playing catch up like in the future?
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, it's more likely we'll look at putting a clause in some of our contract documentation just to point out that this is what we would normally do with other types of policies if we want to make a point of something that may be relevant. Certainly this particular draft policy has gone through all of my staff, so they're well aware of it, and I guess it's just a matter of then doing it that way, so it's a bit easier to actually manage it.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Midgley, anything further?
That is all. Yep, thank you. Just that it's a really positive thing that council has, and the people who have had their say and active transport sort of experts think it's really fantastic that council is doing this.
Councillor Richardson and then Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. In general, I think this is a good policy. I just wanted to clarify a couple of details. So again, I think it's clear that the policy relates to council construction, works, maintenance and the like. 1.2 says to ensure that transport and micro-mobility needs are proactively considered in the planning and design of new infrastructure, including buildings and roads, road upgrades and ongoing infrastructure maintenance. So I'm just after some assurance that this couldn't be inadvertently or accidentally or inappropriately applied to building planning, given that it says planning and design of new infrastructure, including buildings.
Mr. Reeve.
It doesn't specifically say council. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, councillors may recall your debate just a minute ago about the supermarket complex there that talked about some of your bike storage and so forth. This is actually meant to deal with those building sites there that allows endpoints for some of your active transport as well at the same time. So there's that opportunity to input into, for example, where there's a construction of a building there, that there's facilities that are in place there to actually particularly deal with cyclists. To allow for that aspect of it.
Okay. So is this policy going to give council...
Bit louder, please, Councillor Richardson.
How's that?
Stunning.
Is this policy then going to give council additional powers over and above those given to it by the planning scheme?
Councillor Reeve. Mr. Reeve.
Thank you, Mayor. No, through you, Mayor, no. So the intention is this will work with the existing planning scheme that we've actually have at the moment. So this could cover, we don't build a lot of buildings ourselves, but sometimes we retrofit some buildings. It would cover work that we might be doing from a capital perspective, but it would also make reference to, I guess, any other buildings that might be put in place there. So the planning scheme would be what would be used. I guess I was just trying to give a bit of an explanation based on the recent debate there as to what this was intended to actually cover. So effectively to allow for that active transport or that positive active transport, it's not just about the journey, but it's also the end point as well at the same time.
Okay, I guess getting right down to the brass tacks, is this policy going to compel developers, whether they are natural people on their own property or commercial property developers, to do anything more than is required of them within the planning scheme, given that it's saying that we have to actively, and if not, what is it doing?
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor. Well, no, that's a simple answer to it. I guess the intention of the policy is to incorporate some of the decisions we've been making at the moment, but also to strengthen that as well at the same time. So I guess in terms of the buildings part of it, it's just to make sure that we incorporate that into our systems to make sure that that's allowed for. Obviously, it is already allowed for within the planning scheme. It's not meant to be in contradiction with the planning scheme for any new development. It's primarily set forth for, I guess, our own infrastructure, but it does make allowance for guidelines for where there might be a new development from others as well at the same time. So no intention whatsoever for it to be in contradiction with a plan, no intention for it to add an extra overlay on top of anything that might be sitting in the planning scheme.
Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. And just for completeness, clause 6.4 or section 6.4 says that new developments of subdivision in the municipality are to be encouraged to, and then gives a list of things that they're encouraged to do. Again, I just want to confirm that that encouragement is not going to be by way of conditions on planning developments. It's literally just this would be nice, and there's no one's going to be compelled.
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, that's correct. You'll notice that throughout the policy there, there's terminology like that. So it's not, we're not trying to put binding terminology in there. What we're trying to do is incorporate the thinking process into active transport as compared to not, and put a far more positive spin on it. So there's nothing there that is trying to be prescriptive, and that's why words like encourage, words like consider and so forth will be dotted throughout the policy.
Councillor Cordover, I think I had you next.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's a very positive policy. The name gives it away. And 6.1.6, I just had two quick questions around the details. So the first one, I'm looking at page 208, 6.1.6, quote, for new bike parking racks, council's preference is for simple hoop-style bike racks installed according to the Australian standards. My question is, and I'm sure KBAC's looked at this, and apologies for not being on top of it, but obviously there's a range of different options. Now, why are simple hoop-style bike racks the best, as opposed to, if this is supposed to be guidelines for kind of best practice, what was the thinking in choosing that? For example, why isn't it agnostic on what kind of bike parking there should be, or why isn't it aspirational as to whiz-bang better parking?
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, I certainly wasn't there for the debate at KBAC, and so Councillor Midgley might be able to actually add to this, but I think certainly from our perspective and my understanding of the discussion at KBAC, it was along the lines of putting something in place that's simple and easier for all cyclists to actually use. I know you're probably referring to where there's some, I guess, the more interesting or artistic type bike racks that are actually out there. I guess it's not precluding that. I guess it's just noting a preference for keeping it a fairly simple and generic style, which all cyclists can actually use.
Great, thank you. My final question through you, Mayor, is around 6.4.2 in new developments on page 209. Quote, contribute towards active transport, route continuity throughout Kingborough, and where desirable, install 2.5 metre wide minimum shared paths, for example, alongside collector roads and waterways. Similar to my last question about trying to ascertain why we landed there, for example, Transport New South Wales says they should be between 2.5 and 3, but Essex Design Guide says that 3 metres is the minimum, and we heard from Councillor Midgley that 3 metres is the minimum. So I'm just interested to know why we've chosen 2.5 metres wide to be the minimum, and is that ripe for amendment? If the best practice is 3, and these are guidelines to say, hey, if we had our ways, you're not compelled to do it, but we're just recommending here's what we would like to see in our community. 3 metres is what we'd like to see, not 2.5. That was my understanding. So what's the clarification on that?
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, I guess it's all in the wording now. I mean, that's why the brackets of minimum's actually there. So desirable maybe 3 metres, but as a minimum there, we sort of aim for 2.5 metres. So I guess it's difficult because the terminology within that particular clause is actually encourage, and so there's nothing that's actually binding associated with that. But for example, if we were to construct our path ourselves, yes, we'd probably try and aim for 3 metres there, but where other constraints got in the way, we'd actually probably look at going for more of a minimum 2.5 metres, which is pretty similar to what we're actually doing down Channel Highway near Bunnings at the moment. It's just because of that reason. So I think I take your point. You could put the aspirational 3 metres in there. I don't think this actually stops that. It just puts the bracket with a minimum there to try and put a lower bound on it as compared to not.
Thank you. So through you, Mayor, where shared pedestrian and cycle links are deemed appropriate, they should be a minimum of 3 metres wide if the route is shared, or 3.5 metres wide if pedestrians and cyclists are separated. I think it would be a very easy fix to say that the minimum should be 3. Obviously, I'm trying to read the room, and if everybody thinks it's silly. If I was a developer, put it this way, and I want to do the best practice, I want to do the best I can, but I'm not going to spend all the money in the world going for pie-in-the-sky stuff. So I'm going to grab the council guidelines, I'm going to look at the policy and say, okay, positive active transport provisioning policy. Here we are, it says 2.5 minimum, great, I'll do 2.5. Whereas if it said 3, I'd say, great, let's do 3. So I just feel like it should say 3, is how I feel, and I'd like to move an amendment to that effect, because that's what best practice, I mean, it's not even best practice. Best practice is where 3 is the minimum. Best practice is better than 3. Am I wrong? I think I'm right. I feel right.
You should have had the conversation in your head before you verbalised it.
I feel like I'm right. So. So I would like to move that. Exactly.
Okay, so you'd like to move that amendment that it be changed at clause
4.2. Yep, so it's to amend
from 2.5 to 3 metres minimum. Do you have a seconder for that amendment? You can't second it. Councillor Fox seconds it. Now I will go to the... I'm getting there. Because I still have to get a mover and a seconder for the amendment, and then ask, is the amendment acceptable to the mover and the original mover and a seconder? So Councillor Midgley, you were the mover. Is it acceptable to you? Councillor Bain, is it acceptable to you as the seconder? Yes? Okay, in that case then it becomes part of the substantive motion. So the wording in clause 6.4.2 will change from 2.5 metres to 3 metres. All other wording remains the same. So we're now on the substantive motion. So Councillor Gladwright, you're to speak.
Yep, I just wanted to point out why I like this policy in that it speaks to all 3 of the committees. So it really references micro-mobility, it speaks a lot to safety, a lot of the concerns that the Safety Committee talk about, and of course cycling. So I think all in all it's a pretty good policy.
Thank you. Further discussion? Otherwise I'm going to ask Councillor Midgley if she'd like to sum up.
Thank you everybody for sharing, and thank you to Councillor Cordova for raising that 3 metres.
I'll put the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Midgley, seconded by Councillor Bain. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. Takes us to item 16.5, Customer Service Charter on page 210, with the recommendation on page 211, and I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. I've got a mover in Councillor Antoli and a seconder in Councillor Fox. Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a quick one. We are making some updates to our Customer Service Charter. It's time to do so. It was first developed in 2005, and we try and stay on top of these things. There have not been any major changes. Changes to titles have been made. We have removed the ability for people to lodge service requests via fax, which I think is fairly reasonable.
And carry a pigeon.
Even though our doctors talk to each other by fax, work that one out. And also to clarify that we don't have the ability to lodge a service request via Facebook or Instagram because it doesn't link into our customer management system. For those who don't know, any email that is sent to kc and kingborough.tas.gov.au is actually tagged and tracked, and it's not just some sort of generic email where it'll be lost in the ether, or hopefully not. So that's our customer management system. So I think this is a good thing. I also would like to add, it's interesting because it is our CEO who is our chief customer service officer. When you think about that, he or she has to lead the organisation by example, and I believe that they are doing a great job, and improving our customer service is a key responsibility of the CEO. And I know that he's heavily involved in making sure that we improve in this area. Every council needs to improve, not the least of ours. Can I ask a question, Mayor, around the process to do with social media complaints? So if a person lodges a complaint or a service request via social media, how do we then handle that so that they are heard and taken care of and pointed in the right direction?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, if someone was to endeavour to do that on social media, they would be asked to lodge the request through our email system.
Great. And if an individual feels that they have not received a timely response, how do they escalate that? Do they do it via the same email system which they feel has failed them, or do they have an alternative?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, it may not be the email system that's failed them. It may be their understanding of council's processes that have failed them in relation to not receiving the outcome they want. So yes, they could they could go back through the same email process, or they could use any one of the other alternate means of contacting council that are identified within the charter. And obviously there's face-to-face coming into the council, phone, etc. So there are numerous alternate opportunities if people don't feel that their first use of the email system has not worked to their satisfaction.
Thank you. And I should clarify, I didn't mean that the outcome has failed them. They might have sent it through the email and they haven't received a response in a lengthy period of time. That did happen actually recently, that I escalated for that person. But nonetheless, this is a good piece of work, and I commend the CEO and his team to keep cracking on with this, because it's primal to his role, and I don't believe there's anything else further to add.
Thank you. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of points from me. In regards to the Appendix A on page 214, 215, in regards to the response processing time working days, do we sort of ever kind of track that and ensure that we're, because I note that hasn't changed, do we track it to ensure we're kind of on target, or, yeah, just interested in that one.
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, I'd need to take that question on notice. Only very recently inherited customer services from Mr. Malt. I have a feeling we have done some work on this in the past, but I would need to check.
Great, thank you. And further to what Councillor Antoli asked in regards to, say, the messenger aspect regarding social media, Facebook, will there be like an automated reply to, say, email Casey at Kingborough, I'm guessing? Is that correct? Or if someone does send a messenger, just that process, please.
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, no, it's not automated. We do moderate our posts, and that's where we pick up that response.
Oh, okay, thank you. So there's no aspect where you can message council. Does everyone know that? You know, when you directly message council on the social media page.
Slide into our DMs.
Yeah, the DM. So can you DM us, and is there an automatic response when you DM? I guess that's what I'm wondering. If people are doing that, then...
I know for some business pages you can turn that off.
Yes.
The CEO.
Through you, Mayor, I've just sent Kingborough Council a test message on Messenger, and it comes up with an automated response that we will respond as soon as we can. There's the customer service team number, or please email casey@kingborough.tas.gov.au for all inquiries, and it'll be directed to, I'm paraphrasing, to the relevant staff. So there's
that information. Yeah, that's what I was wondering, exactly that. And the other question in regards to 5.6, where it's got communication with council, just noting here we do state still Facebook and Instagram, but I guess just that terminology around, that's more, we're using Facebook and Instagram in regards to promoting events, whereas if we put it under communication, I see that as kind of like a way that I communicate. Does that make sense? Am I making sense in that regards? Two-way engagement, yeah. So if we're not wanting people to kind of engage with us through those platforms, but we're putting it under there, I'm just wondering, do we want to put those there? Because they're more of a promotion of events versus a communication, but I guess they're communicating events. I don't know, it's just that thing. We don't want people to engage with it and expect a response, but anyway, that's just a thought. Maybe I'm overthinking.
I can't help you. Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, if you note the track changes version, it used to say how to contact council. So we've specified in the charter that we don't actually want complaints and service requests lodged through social media, but I guess what we've endeavoured to do is say that council still uses social media as a communication tool, and hence we've included it under communication, but it's certainly not intended to be two-way engagement in that regard. So, but I think given that the previous clauses within the charter spell that out, I don't think there's an opportunity for this to be confusing.
We're fine. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a really minor thing. In that 5.3.3, we mentioned a bunch of ways that people can get in contact with council, and then we specifically note, but not through social media. It just strikes me as a little unusual that we've noted a way that you can't contact us, and I'm assuming that's because this is a significant issue. And I guess I'm just after a bit of an explanation as to why we've put one specific form of communication that can't be used, rather than just saying these are the ways you can get in contact with us, and thereby everything else is not it.
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, yes, it certainly has been an issue. We have had in recent times people express frustration at not being able to make a formal complaint via our social media. So the reason it's been included there is just to spell that out, that whilst we do have experiences in the past where people have endeavoured to do that for the reasons that are in the Charter and Councillor Antoli referred to, it's just a really poor means for us to be receiving those complaints or service requests.
I guess if I can just add to that, I guess we're potentially talking about two different things. Somebody could direct message us with a complaint, or they might think that it's acceptable to lodge a complaint by just making a comment on a Kingborough Council Facebook post. And that's when it starts to get difficult, because how do you actually then, track that person? How do you validate that that is an actual real person who, lives in Kingborough, who has a genuine complaint, etc. So there's probably two issues when it comes to complaints via social media that we're talking about. And I agree that, for somebody to expect to read a council post and then leave a message in the comments, leave a comment in the under the post to say, well, I'm not happy about the road outside my house because there's 4 potholes in it, and expect that to be actioned on, I think is unrealistic and not something that we would want to encourage, but rather direct people through to the regular channels. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mayor. Just have a question around the customer service process itself. So we get to 5.3.5 where the customer service unit allocates a service request to the appropriate department. I'm just curious to know if, when that goes to the appropriate department, are we committed to closing the loop and getting back to the customer and saying, your pothole is being filled, or if it's filled, that's the job done?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, yes, we are committed to that. Are we fulfilling it on every occasion? I'd like to think so. You will note that in 5.3.4 we've included if required. Now the reason for that is people will lodge a service request that we can't actually action. So we're not going to send every request through as a service request. So, someone might say, please build an aquatic centre. We're not going to send that through to the works depot as a service request. But we will be getting back to the person and providing details in relation to the issue.
Yep. So, but the ones that do make it through, you would expect a reply to say that job's been complete.
Correct.
Yep. Thanks.
Anything further? Councillor Antoli, did you want to sum up? I'm going to put the recommendation then, moved by Councillor Antoli, seconded by Councillor Fox. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. Takes us to page 224, Financial Report for September 2024, with a recommendation on the following page. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved Councillor Bain, seconded Councillor Cordova. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm conscious we've been going for a little while, so I'll try and keep it brief. Financial report for September 2024. The year-to-date underlying result is 0.710 million favourable to budget. That's an increase from 0.536 last month, so we've continuing to improve. It is noted in the report that it's early stage of the financial year, so we do have to take it with a grain of salt. Some of the major positive variances we've got rates are up from 117 to 129,000. Statutory fees and fines and user fees are all increased from last month as well. So Just a question I have here is, these are all estimates year to date. So I'm curious to know when we become certain enough that these can transfer to end of year forecasts.
Thank you, Mr. Spinks.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Look, I think the short answer is horses for courses. Different variances, sort of. I mean, there are examples of where sometimes early in the financial year you can sort of make a bit of a judgment call, or you can have some level of confidence that a variance will continue to exist for the entirety of the year. Generally speaking, though, that they are sort of few and far between. They tend to be those kinds of annual payment type of examples. Insurance could be one. More generally, though, variances sort of tend to sort of trend throughout the year, and it's generally sort of better to wait a little while. And in some cases, it's even a case of sort of having to wait till quite late in the financial year to know whether a variance is going to be sort of permanent or timing or fix itself. So there is no sort of magic number or month of the year when we say, okay, we can sort of lock these variances in and make some forecast revisions. It just tends to be more based on the individual item that we're talking about, and we just make a judgment call. Okay.
Councillor Bain.
So just when it comes to the mid-year budget review, would some assumptions be made for that?
Mr. Spinks.
Better. Look, there may be some that we even adjust before then, but certainly at the half-year review, I would think there'd be some adjustments made to the revisions, to the forecasts.
Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mayor. And just a question in regards to one of the expenses which is over, and that's the employee costs. They've increased from $157,000 over year to date to $249,000, so it's quite an increase. Interested to know whether you think that's something which will correct itself, or is this a concern moving forward?
Mr. Spinks.
Through you, Mayor. Look, my instinct at this point in time is that it will correct itself. The majority of the variance is due to the fact that as people work here, they're accruing leave, and we capture that cost. But of course, in the early parts of the financial year, not too many people are taking leave. So that variance tends to correct itself sort of through Christmas and January, when lots of people tend to take their leave. So I would expect that to largely correct itself, although we can never predict how much leave is going to be taken throughout the year. We also have vacant positions, and that's just a nature of the business and any business. And the other item that's contributing to that at the moment is year to date, we've probably done a little bit less capital works than we might have expected. And what that means is those works crews are therefore doing maintenance and operational works, and their salaries and wages therefore get expensed, and so go straight to the bottom line, as opposed to being capitalised, which is what happens with capital works. So over the warmer months, as we go forward, I'm sure again that situation will reverse itself and we'll ramp up the capital works program, but it is something we'll need to monitor as the year goes on.
Councillor Bain.
Thank you.
Councillor Cordova and then Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Mayor. This just relates to 4.2, the grants capital being over budget due to grants being carried forward into the new financial year. So I'm just interested in hearing kind of I guess a bit of a project update. Summerlees Road Underpass, Taroona Bike Lane and the change rooms at Kingston Beach Oval. Is it delays that's why this appears as grant capital is over budget by 1.4 million, is because those projects are delayed, so they've carried forward into this new financial year? Like, what's going on with those three projects?
Mr. Spinks.
Through you, Mayor, look, I can answer that in part. In terms of their progress, perhaps Mr. Reeve might be better to answer those, but in terms of sort of the accounting for them, it just means that those projects weren't complete at 30 June, and therefore some of the grant applicable to those projects carries over into the new financial year, and therefore we take it up as income in this financial year. So that's how we account for it. But in terms of the progress of the projects themselves, perhaps someone else might be better to respond to that.
That'd be Mr. Reeve then.
Yes, through you, Mayor. Yeah, so it's interesting with grads there because they don't follow our budget sequence. They follow someone else's budget sequence, and so often they come into not at the beginning of years, they come towards the end of years, so you'll constantly get this issue actually happening. In terms of the actual projects itself, they're all moving along, so some of these road underpasses obviously moving along, so you'd all be aware of that. The Taroona bike lanes is just finalising the design at the moment, so that one will be due to go to tender fairly shortly. And the last one, which is the Kingston Beach Oval change rooms, is well underway.
Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is around 5.2, the underlying deficit results projected into the future. For the uninitiated, can Council Officer confirm that that still takes into account the increased rates that we initiated as well?
Mr Spinks.
Through you, Mayor, yes it does.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Otherwise I'm going to put the recommendation, because I assume Councillor Bain you don't want to sum up. So I'm going to put it as moved by Councillor Bain, seconded by Councillor Cordova. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Appendices with a recommendation on page 282. Got a mover in Councillor Gladwright, seconder in Councillor Midgley. Questions on the appendices? Councillor Midgley.
It's not a question. It's not a question. That it's just I really appreciate it.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, I'll put the recommendation then. Moved by Councillor Gladwright, seconded by Councillor Midgley. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Takes us to page 282. Notices of motion. There are no notices of motion. And then confirmation of items to be dealt with in closed session. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder that we move into closed session to consider the items that are listed in the agenda. I've got a mover in Councillor Midgley, seconder in Councillor Bain. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. In accordance with the Kingborough Council meeting audio recording guidelines policy, recording of the open session of the meeting will now cease. Time being 8:12 p.m. Thank you very much to those people who have been watching along at home. The open session of council is now adjourned at 8.